So, welcome to Shake Out Your Sleeves and Go, support for discovering deep joy through the profound subtlety of the Zen way. I am Dosho, and I'm here today with Meido Roshi. We'll be talking about the koan way in general and Record of Going Easy Case 2, Bodhidharma's Just Clarity. First, a word about Meido Roshi. Meido began Zen training with Tenzan Toyoda Rokoji in the Omori Sogen Roshi line and continued with Dogen Hasakawa Roshi, Sozan Miller, from whom he received a transmission. He started Korinji in central Wisconsin, a project you've been going at about like 20 years, right? Something like that. Incredible. A Rinzai training monastery right in the middle of Wisconsin. It's wonderful. He was installed as abbot there in 2013. He's also trained in Shingon, Tendai, and Chugendo. So he's one of the more widely trained Western Zen folks as well. One of the things I appreciate most about Meido Roshi's teaching is how grounded it is in the wide scope of the received tradition of the Bodhidharma. His books, which interestingly you don't include in your bio, but which most people are peddling their books.
Web person.
I found it there. The Rinzai Zen Way, A Guide to Practice, and Hidden Zen, Practices for Sudden Awakening and Embodied Realization. He also has a recent chapter in Guogu's book, Jimmy Yu's book, Readings of the Gateless Barrier, titled Koan Kufu, catchy title, Embodying the Koan in Rinzai Zen Practice, which also, by the way, includes Meido's Kensho story. So a little part of it anyway, which I found very interesting. So first, koan in general. What does the koan way, and let's bracket that with when integrated with other practices, which you are a very clear proponent of, what does the koan way have to offer people? Why koan? Why all these nasty little stories from long ago?
Liberation. What else? Otherwise, we're wasting our time. But I think we have to remember when we talk about koan that we have, as you well know, these curricula or systems of koans involving oftentimes many cases. But the original practice was certainly not so organized. And as Hoshikawa Roshi, one of my teachers you mentioned, often said to us, you don't need all of these koans. If you can get to the bottom of one of them completely, I'll give you the answers to the rest. None of us could ever take him up on that. But the richness of the curricula, of the many koans that we have is truly a precious thing. But I never want someone to feel daunted by it or to think that they're not all in some essential way pointing at the same thing.
Yeah, agreed. Somebody just recently, I think last week, asked me, do we really need all these koans? Like, no, you don't need them. Just do one completely, like you said.
All the way, yeah.
And at the same time, if you can do one completely, why not do some more? Like 500, because it's like...
And as you know, it's a very common experience too. If someone penetrates one somewhat sufficiently, 4 or 5 or 6 or more may suddenly open themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not uncommon to go through a bunch at a time.
Right.
Or in the case to penetrate a koan and realize suddenly that all of the koan I had previously so-called penetrated, I did not at all. That's a wonderful and daunting experience too.
Right. So from many perspectives, working through over and over, Anyway, in ancient times, they would, even for Hakuin, it doesn't seem like he was using 500 koans.
No, not at all. We have to blame his heirs and their heirs for that.
Yeah. So, now you said, I was kind of hoping you'd get into this in your earlier, but you've said in the past that we don't need koans, that, students that work with the breath can go as deeply as people that have done koan work. Is that have you though ever personally worked with somebody who's had kensho with breath practice?
I have. I wouldn't say it was a deep opening, but certainly a genuine one. And then immediately I give them a koan.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, the wonder of the koan, and even if we have many of them, even if we have more than we need, each of them is a facet of the same jewel. And it's only by turning and looking at the different facets that you really understand all of them. To me, that's the power of that method, or again, the richness of it. So while I will sometimes say that not everyone needs koans or not everyone is suited to them, I would say most people in Rinzai practice, they're going to bump up against them at one point or another simply because they're so useful.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's very, it's so simple because they're useful,
Yeah.
you know, and they help people be liberated, as you said.
Really
I,
genius. I mean, genius method, really.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And after having done shikantaza for a lot of years and then, working with koans, that's what I thought again and again was like, and particularly through what we call the Mu series and then the miscellaneous koan, it's like, wow, at first you think they seem kind of random, and in a way they are, but there's like deep genius in not only the specific koans, but the order, also how they scaffold essentially.
You cannot help but feeling a real sense of awe.
Yes.
When you see the whole system from the top at some point, it still takes my breath away.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've also, by the way, worked with students, especially people who tend to come around here who've done, Soto work for a while in Shikantaza and had Kenshos in Shikantaza, but with Shikantazas. But similar to what you said, probably not the deepest Kenshos because Shikantaza tends to not necessarily the way it was intended, but it tends to be diffuse, and not so focused. So people kind of bump up against Kensho anyway. But clearly other work is required.
I hope when you visit us here at Korenji that you will teach Shikantaza to my students.
Well, I will. It's very simple. It's what is the source of Mu? That is that is Shikantaza. Let's see. How has your background in Shugendo, Shingon, and Tentai shifted, if it has, your how you see Rinzai training and the koan process particularly? I noticed in the chapter that you have there, by the way, you mentioned the three mysteries, and I was like, oh, there's a little Shingon influence coming in there.
Yeah, and I recently, rereading Torienji, Hakuin's great student, who wrote that amazing book, The Inexhaustible Lamb, talking about the Zen version of the three mysteries, how Shingon has the three mysteries, and this is how we understand the three mysteries. He has some chapters in that book where he talks about other sects like that and relates their paths, while affirming their paths as completely valid, relates them to the Rinzai Zen path. Very interesting. And incidentally, just as a tangent, apparently he also spent some time doing Shingon practice, reciting the 5-syllable mantra of Dainichi Nyorai, and reportedly had an amazing experience doing that. So he was a broad-minded person, which I guess was more common back then. I would never say that someone has to cross-train, so to speak. I just did it because of my interest, and I wanted to fill in some knowledge deficits about Japanese Buddhism as a whole. But what it showed me, first of all, is that Zen people who think they're the only sect that does really hard training are really mistaken. Incredibly intense shugyo done in many of these traditions. Second of all, I saw that Rinzai Zen, I should just say Zen, doesn't lack anything at all. If anything, that sort of cross-training affirmed to me how pure and how almost ridiculously direct the Zen path is, and that we don't need more than that. It's what we might call a very unelaborate approach, very direct approach, even severe, but so incredibly profound, arriving at the same places as other traditions do, but in a way which again is rather genius. and again, somewhat shocking in its directness. I've come to appreciate that more and more. So simultaneously, I've come to feel that Zen was an ideal foundation to study anything. If you can catch the something of the point of Zen, you will understand what the point of all so-called practice methods are. Even if you don't know the methods themselves, you can understand the gist or the point. At the same time, Zen doesn't need them. We have everything we need.
So what do you think is characteristic then of the Zen way?
I mean, well, most people would immediately answer, well, it's focused on Zazen and so on, and it's tremendous development of meditative discipline. If I have to say what the characteristics of Zen are primarily, it's those words of Bodhidharma, direct pointing at the human mind, which takes place within the human relationship of the teacher and the student. So I will always return to that as the central defining characteristic of Zen, which it holds in common with some other traditions. I think of in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, so-called guru's role is so central. I think Zen is something like that. It doesn't mean we don't stand on our own feet, but that the point is that the direct pointing takes place in the human relationship, not from texts, not from hearing about it, but within the two Buddhas unveiling or exploring the Dharma. So
Yeah.
for that reason, I've often said that I would not say Zazen is the main method. I would say Sanzen is the main method of Zen.
And that kind of simple directness also of that comes through in the literature, like with the koan. Like instead of Namu Amida Butsu, which of course wonderful practice, but mu, and then the interactions really that the first koan, usually mu, doesn't have so much interaction. There's a little interaction there, but there's like with what we'll get into next. I guess this could be a segue even that there's two people and they're working this out. They're working together.
Hammer and tongs, as we say.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at the koan, the second case here in the record of Going Easy. Emperor Wu of Liang asked Bodhidharma, what is the highest meaning of the holy truth? Bodhidharma said, just clarity, or sometimes translated as vastness. No holy. The emperor said, who then is this person facing me now? Nice question, actually. Bodhidharma said, don't know. The emperor was not pleased. Bodhidharma crossed the river, arrived at Shaolin, and sat facing a wall for 9 years. So this case also occurs in the Blue Cliff Record. First case there, second case here. In the Harari Asatani system, we first encounter it after about 150 koans or so. Yeah, well, and the Blue Cliff, and then 100 or so more, and then we meet it again here in the Shoyoroku, or Record of Going Easy. So I assume you, in the Inzan curriculum, you also work with this koan. It sounds like it's earlier on in the curriculum.
Yeah, somewhat. And I should say our lineage carries Inzan, but it's also a little bit mixed with Takuju. So we have kind of an interesting flavor, I would say, to our Shitsunai. But I guess this koan for us, we would class it as a Hoshin koan, the koans which have the purpose of revealing one's own Dharmakaya wisdom. I want to say it's maybe 20 or 20 something in to curriculum. Yeah. So one has already passed through Mu or a similar initial koan and a lot of the so-called miscellaneous koans and many, some koan after that, and then get hit back up the head with the fundamental point of this one. And it's a fun one.
Yeah. You have this intense interaction. Probably, it's not like real, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, just a little detail. It's not like historically real. It doesn't matter at all in Zen, but it's probably not.
And I like to imagine the sort of more colloquial language, Emperor Wu saying not, well, who is this before me, but more something like, well, who the hell do you think you are?
Yeah. Well, there's that too. Yeah. Just clarity, no holy. Well, and no holy also suggests not only that there's no holy things, but there's no holy people. So that would be a very, good rendering of this. It's like you're standing here because you're a sage. So if you're not a sage from India, what are we doing here? Yeah. So, without getting into, of course, in the room stuff, what do you see as the key Dharma points that are emphasized here in this case?
I was thinking about this koan. I went back. We used the Sakita translation. He says, emptiness, no holiness. I like the just clarity or clarity. It's very nice. This is a koan which to me, again, with many koan, if you only had one, this could suffice because I think, and this may come into, I think, a question that you may want to ask about how people get tripped up by this koan too. I think it's very easy to see this koan from the incorrect viewpoint of just constant negation. Everything is empty. There's nothing that's holy. Oh, who are you that stands before me? I don't know. And that's a place where students do get tripped up in that kind of conceptual pit of negation.
Mm-hmm.
But the koan actually, I should say, in Ashish and I, we don't get into a lot of, examining line by line, sechos, a verse, or anything like that. It's just those two questions. What is the meaning of clarity, no holiness, or vast emptiness, no holiness? And what is the meaning of Bodhidharma saying, I don't know?
Mm.
And within the play of those two, there's a complete negation of so-called self, and there's the complete reaffirmation of the so-called selfless self. And there's a complete whole within the koan that I think is revealed when it's penetrated well. So from that standpoint, again, if you get to the bottom of this one, maybe you don't need so many other koan. It's that profound. It's that rich.
Yeah, well, and there's a subtle point there, right? I mean, and people think that emptiness is a subtle point, but emptiness is actually sliding past the point. And you have to go through it. You have to slide past the point to find it. But
Elsewhere in our koan curriculum, I don't know the source of this, if it's actually a quote from someone, but it's affirmed that to fall into the trap of trying to view things from the standpoint of emptiness, or even to have the experience of that so-called nature, and then to cultivate it as a way of seeing, is actually a gross infraction of the Buddhist precepts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complete downfall.
Mm-hmm.
Second half of this koan slaps you in the face with that, or forces you to deal with that, I think. So to me, that's one of the great values of it.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Zhuyi way of talking about, rather than two truths, which somehow this two truths thing is just like all over in the West. But,
because of Tibetan Buddhist discourse, I think.
You think so? That's interesting.
Yeah,
I get that. But, Zhuyi has this great innovation, really, of reading Nagarjuna, actually, probably reading into him, but still reading Nagarjuna. So he's talking about the, conventional, the empty, and the middle, which really, I think the whole koan curriculum could be, understood as that. You agree?
Oh. I agree completely. Maybe the middle in this koan is a Bodhidharma going off to sit for 9 years in the cave.
Yeah. You know about those Tendai scholars who say that maybe the wall actually is stopping and gazing is seeing. So maybe they've got Bodhidharma.
Apparently there's a Tibetan translation of that phrase describing what Bodhidharma did, which is something, if I recall correctly, something like gazing at the nature.
Well, that's even clearer. Yeah, great. So we are, as you mentioned, and going to be working together in August at Korinji, and listeners are welcome to contact Korinji and see if there's still spots available and come down and work with us through the weekend on One Mind, One School. Is that what we're calling it? What are you calling it?
Then One School, One Mind.
There you go. Now, this collection was gathered and then commented on by Hongzhi and Wansong, the two Saodong Soto, masters, What do you see in the commentary's capping phrases or verse that stands out for you as something that, like a Linji Rinzai master would not say? What is there? Kind of a leading question, I suppose, but
Oh, you're leading me a little bit there. What are you looking for?
well, I thought I'm open. Like if you saw something there, I'd like to hear about it. But you mentioned house wind. So is there a house wind that you detect in this?
I mean, again, my experience of koan training is somewhat limited. It's only the system which we have in our lineage. I haven't bounced around. I bounce around more to other sects than I have to other Rinzai teachers, unfortunately, or other Zen teachers. But in the Jakugo, the capping phrases to this koan, I would just say one thing that's interesting, especially to the first part of the koan about so-called clarity, no holiness. We have two capping phrases. One of them is the one that it is recorded Inzan gave, is Sanzen, when he was a student. The other one is the one recorded that Takuju gave. And we're exhorted to compare those two to catch the different, we say kiai, the different vitality or vibration, house wind of those two guys, even within the so-called mainstream Rinzai. So there is that. There's a sensitivity to that, and I think especially the second half of the koan where you must reply to that I don't know. One's own sort of native character has to come out in that answer, even more so than the first. That's the place where your own wind, so to speak, has to explode forth for all to see clearly. So that the answers that come to that part of the koan very, very interesting. They really show something about the character of the person.
Yeah. So you didn't really answer that question.
Probably not. It's okay. Not how we are.
The capping phrases are very interesting. And what did you say? Each person's wind. Like more and more, I don't get the house wind. I think it's mostly what we're picking up is, of course, the individual expression. In kind of in terms of classic Soto stuff, you have Rujing and Dogen. Rujing was like shouting and beating people, talking about shitting and farting, and Dogen was this kind of imperial upper class kid. So he had very, noble kind of bearing and refined expression, refined and really complex expression. Student and teacher and student, and very different expression. So
reminds me of Muso Soseki and Kanzan Eigen, the famous story of those guys. Muso, teacher to the emperors, going by his palanquin with his servants, seeing Kanzan raking leaves in the yard of his temple and commenting, "Oh, all my students are going to leave me for Kanzan."
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Let's see. Last things. Well, you already touched on it a bit, but so you already mentioned about the how people can go wrong with this. But so then, what is the highest priority for the teaching in this case?
It has to be their own. Again, at least in our way of approaching it, even the answer to the central point of the koan, that first part of the koan, has to come out in a manner that it reflects the ramifications for the life. It's not a theoretical emptiness, certainly not. And it's not getting stuck in, as I said, trying to see from that viewpoint. But given that realization, if it's genuine, what does that mean here and now? Person sitting in front of me. The kind of traditional answer that we have preserved brings out that flavor very much to me. So that's what I'm looking for, and I think that's the great value of it.
Well, I agree. So that's it. Thank you so much. It's time, though, to...
That's to have someone I agree with all the time.
Yeah. I think we might disagree about a few things. Well, we'll have to get into those in August, or people will be nodding off, So let's at least even make some stuff up.
They're going to be nodding off the whole time.
If you have them up at 4 and sitting up till midnight, they will be.
Really looking forward to it.
Now we have to shake out our sleeves. You got good sleeves for it, man. Thank
Yeah,
you.
today. Thank you.